local library literary chat. I have with me Adult Services Reference Librarian Marcella Curry. She works here at the Sturgis Library. You know, want to start off today with actually a local author. She is one of my favorites, and you recommended this author to us all in a previous local library literary chat, Sally Cabot Gunning. She is amazing. She writes historical fiction, and she's written a lot about Cape Cod. This one in particular that I recently read was Benjamin Franklin's Bastard. I also recently read Monticello, her very new book.
Great, yeah, that's been popular, and she's been getting big crowds as she goes around and talks about that.
Well-deserved crowds, because I'll tell you, these books are really hard to put down. They're very entertaining, very easy to read, and just engrossing.
And she does a lot of research. She has done research here, and with Monticello, I felt like she had grown up there.
Yeah.
Didn't it feel so atmospheric?
Yeah, she just really, I think, Monticello was actually based on the daughter of, I'm blanking on his name.
Thomas Jefferson.
Thank you, Thomas Jefferson. So it's based on Thomas Jefferson's daughter, and really talking about how she felt about so many things in his life and so many things that they experienced. It was a very interesting book. And then this, of course, about Benjamin Franklin and the life that he led and the women who loved him. So very enthralling, entertaining read right here.
Right, because she talks about how with this, she was doing research and came across the fact that he'd had this son out of wedlock, and there's no mention of who the mother is, or there's nothing known about her. And of course now here's the story for Sally to dive into. Yeah.
Right, and
yeah.
I just love that. I also read, I kind of went on a Sally Cabot Gunning reading spree. Because
that's what happens.
I liked Monticello so much that I read Benjamin Franklin's Bastard, and I also read her The Widow's War.
Widow's War, you're right. And then she has two more after that that helps follow those characters, and those take place right here. They come down into Barnstable Village.
It's so neat, talking about some of the really famous people that were sort of Barnstable's founding fathers, if you want to talk about that. She mentions a lot of really well-known characters, and even talks about Mercy Otis Warren and James Otis. So really cool to sort of hear about that in the historical context, just living on Cape Cod, but then to read about the fiction.
Yes.
Very fun, very fun.
So you told me you were going to talk about Sally, so it got me thinking, okay, what are my favorites that have to do with the Cape? And one of them is this book, Under Cape Cod Waters. And Ethan Daniels is a photographer, and he travels the world for National Geographic and other publications, but he came back to Cape Cod and went underwater there.
Oh my goodness, they're stunning photos.
Yeah, so under the water to see what's under there. So it's just so fun. I bought it to have it at home and take a look at it.
Well, it's a great conversation piece, and I think too we have so many, as Cape Codders, we have so many people that love to come visit in the season, and I think it's great to have a book like this for them to explore the Cape, but through photos.
Right. And then another one that I really enjoyed is Cottage for Sale Must Be Moved. Kate Woolley lives here on the Cape, and I believe her home is here in the town of Barnstable. And she had bought herself a home, and it was small, and she worked out of her home and kept dreaming of expanding, and she sees an ad that you could have this cottage, but you have to move it. And this is all about that adventure of moving that cottage, expanding her home, and dealing with all that process. And just, it's an interesting look at life here on the Cape in more contemporary times.
So interesting too, I think. I actually see this happen a number of times where people want to get rid of a home but don't want to tear it down because it does have historical value.
Right. And there's actually a long history of that on the Cape. A lot of buildings were moved around. So I think that's it's like a modern version of that.
Love it.
Still happening.
Love it.
One more about the Cape is the ice margin. Takes place here in Barnstable, and takes place back in the 40s, and it's looking at families and finding your place in the world, and I really love it. I recommend it to a lot of people. Kind of a quiet novel, not a fast-paced story.
But some of those quiet novels can really like get they have an eye for people and how people react to things. And I love the character-driven stories.
Yes.
Love that. Well, one of my favorite books is by Alan Brennert, and he wrote Honolulu. This is a great story. It's a historical fiction. It's really it's about women traveling to Hawaii in about 1914. Very from Asia. Very interesting novel. Just character-driven again. Very interesting story. This is actually kind of fast-paced. I couldn't put this down, and I actually really also loved his book Molokai, which is about a leprosy colony in Hawaii. And when I read the description, I read the description after I read Honolulu, loved it so much, wanted to keep reading. Read the description and thought to myself, this is crazy. Like, why would that be entertaining? I really don't want to read about what it's like in a leprosy colony in Hawaii. But boy, was it an interesting take on how people deal with troubles and trials in their life. And how, despite how really horrible things can happen, you still have community and friendships and family that get you through.
I hear a lot about both those books, so they have to get onto my to-read list.
Oh, you would love them.
I haven't done that.
And I think any fans of historical fiction would really love them. So Honolulu and Molokai by Alan Brennert. Great author.
Keeping with historical fiction, I thought about Stephen L. Carter, and I've enjoyed a lot of his books. This is interesting because he takes an event, October '62, the missile crisis with Cuba, and he inserts a fictional character into that, a young black woman who's one of the few black women at Cornell. So she's a fascinating character, all that she's dealing with just on a personal level, and then what she has to deal with in society. And it was a great story, interesting character, but interesting time too.
You know, I love this author. I'm so glad you brought this up because this is one I'm definitely going to have to pick up. I have read a couple books. The Emperor of Ocean's Park he wrote, and that was based on Martha's Vineyard. So that was really fun to read. Very fast-paced. I couldn't put that book down. And then I read, I think it was Whiteout, or he wrote something. What was his other book?
Because that takes place in like New Haven area. New England White.
New England White. Yes. So fantastic author. And was this fast-paced, as fast-paced as some of his other work, or is this a little bit slower?
I feel like it was, because there's this missile crisis happening, which kind of gives a sense of urgency. And then there's a lot going on with the characters that feels urgent too. And what's amazing about him, he's a professor of law at Yale, and he writes a lot of law books too. So it just boggles my mind that someone
how you can go from fiction to legal writing.
And just have the time to do that.
And the talent, I think.
And the talent.
Because legal writing is so different than writing fiction. So back channel, gonna have to pick that. Stephen L. Carter. Thank you for recommending that.
Sure.
I always love these talks, Marcella, because I think I pick so much up and get some great book recommendations from you. So what else do you have for us today?
Well, this was a book, Kate Atkinson. I had read her and liked some of hers, and then some I found maybe too dark or too intense. But I was at one of our local beaches, and they had a little library like we have down in the village, and I think they're popping up around, and picked up, started early, took my dog, and it was just great as a beach read, and I enjoyed it a lot. And it was interesting because it jumps around in time and it jumps around in perspective, but she handles it really well. There's some difficult events that happen, but she doesn't, to me, I don't want to get too much detail around that. And there's, again, a lot about people and how they handle situations and how your past informs your present. I enjoyed it.
Love it. Started Early, Took My Dog by Kate Atkinson. Thank you. This is kind of a funny book. It's a little bit off of the fiction, but I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I started reading this when she was probably 11. It's called The Drama Years by Hayley Kirkpatrick, and boy, does it help. It's a great tool to help parents who may be in that age, because as we know, there can be a lot of drama in the teenage years. So this has some great tips. I almost use it as a reference book and sometimes flip back when I'm dealing with something. How is the best way to deal with this issue? So this has been a really great reference for me just as she grows to throw it in. And The Drama Years by Hayley Kirkpatrick. So yeah, yeah.
Wanna
Are we done, or do
keep
we still
going?
do we have more? Oh yeah.
Yeah, I have more. So This Must Be the Place is a fairly new novel, and again, kind of along the Kate Atkinson, it's a huge cast of characters, and I had a good piece of advice when I started to write it, that you start a chapter sometimes and you're kind of like, wait a minute, who's that? And if you just let that go, it'll fall into place. And she moves around in time. She has some amazing, there was one scene where one of the women is like a Angelina Jolie type character, and it was a fascinating look what it would be like to be someone like that, and how your world is so challenging in a certain way. And again, it's about family and working through your differences and finding your place and what you're comfortable with.
Love reading books like that. Love reading books that are, taking a look at how we interact with each other and the relationships that we formed. Always such good stories.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning, Marcella. We really appreciate it. I think I have to get my library card out because
Yes.
I think I want to check out a lot of books today. And of course, we'll get back with you soon for another local library literary chat.
Great.